In this episode, I get into the fun parts of building the Traveler Bulkhead, and I'm also doing some reflecting on a book I just read about Mike Plant. I got to give a short shout out to Cranston and Ryan for recommending the book to me, so thanks guys, and enjoy the episode. My name is Matt. Follow along as I turn Duracell, the legendary ocean racing sailboat, into a comfortable cruising home. A lot of people have been asking questions about the design, the structure, how I'm going to build this Traveler Bulkhead, what its function is. It is true that this is a really important part of the boat because not only is it the back wall of the doghouse, but it's also going to have the Traveler track on top of it. And so the Traveler, to those of you that don't know again, is a part of the control for the mainsail of the boat. And so what ends up happening is this part is really highly loaded. It's one of the most highly loaded parts in the boat when the boat is sailing really hard. And the loads they're very dynamic. They're either going straight up when I'm sailing upwind really hard, or if I accidentally crash jibe, then there's a lot of load going outboard and forward. And so this part has to be built really strong. So I've put together basically the core of the Traveler Bulkhead, and today I'm going to start laminating the structure that goes around this Traveler Bulkhead.
We'll get to laminating the Traveler Bulkhead in a minute, but first, let's go to earlier this week.
What are you doing this evening, Matt?
I am epoxying around the edge of the doghouse roof so that when I vacuum bag it, the tape has something to seal against.
So you read an interesting book recently. What was it called?
I read Julia Plant's book called Coyote Lost at Sea. It's the story about Mike Plant's life. Basically, it's a biography of Mike Plant, more or less. It was a fascinating book. Mike Plant was he was quite the adventurer, and this was the second boat that he built after Airco was an open 50. That was the boat that he won his class of the BOC on. That was also designed by Roger Martin. And so after he won that race, soon after I think the race happened, the Vendée Globe was announced. It was the first time the Vendée Globe was ever happening. And the Vendée Globe is different than the BOC in that the Vendée Globe was nonstop. So it was a single-handed nonstop circumnavigation. And it was only for open 60 boats, only open 60s could race in it. And so I think Mike Plant knew as soon as he had gotten back from doing the BOC and the Vendée Globe came up, he knew he had to do it. And so he kind of fought tooth and nail to earn every penny, and he got Roger Martin involved and to design the boat. And this boat was pretty radical, I guess, for its time. The Open 60 wasn't a new class because they had raced them in the BOC before, but they were becoming this kind of real high-tech racing design, and they were very expensive, obviously, to have designed and built. It cost him $750,000, which I don't know what that is in today's money. That was in 1987, I think, was when he first started working on Duracell. But Mike built this boat pretty much by himself. He would kind of get anybody who he could to help him build the boat, including he hired homeless people off the street to come and help him do huge laminations and stuff. And he didn't like it. In fact, he hated building the boat because he hated the resin and the sanding and the grinding and I guess the tediousness of the whole thing.
Now back to the shop to laminate the Traveler Bulkhead.
Last week I laminated up the core for the Traveler Bulkhead to give it a base before I add the bulk of the fiberglass. I needed to glue an aluminum bar to the top of the bulkhead, and I'll get to the purpose of this aluminum bar later. But the bar is 2 inches wide and the foam is 1 inch, so I cut foam fairings so the fiberglass can cleanly lay around the top of the bulkhead. And I shaped them with a router and grinder so there were no hard edges or corners. How I'm going to build this part is I'm basically going to build a fiberglass U-shaped beam that goes over the top, and then around the outside of the entire bulkhead will be a whole bunch of biaxial fiberglass. And so the beam on top is what the Traveler will be bolted to, and then the biaxial around the outside will disperse the load into the rest of the boat. Also in conjunction with the doghouse sides, and the roof will also help disperse the load. And then, well, I'll get to this later once we actually install this part into the boat, but there will be unidirectional straps that go over top of the whole bulkhead. But again, I'll get to that later. Also, if you look over here, you'll see that there's an aluminum bar that goes across the entire top. Since I don't have access to the underside of the Traveler, I can't through bolt it and put nuts on the underside. So I'm going to tap the bolts into this aluminum after obviously the whole thing has been completed and built. And so if you look here, it's actually 2 layers of aluminum, and so there's the top and the bottom. So there'll be plenty of meat for the bolts to bolt to once I get to that point. Obviously, this part is going to be built with fiberglass and epoxy, just like the rest of my project, and vacuum bagged as well. I have to do this in 3 laminations because there's so much fiberglass going into this part, and this is the first of the 3 laminations that I'll be doing.
Let's go back to the boat for a minute for a few more thoughts about Mike Plant.
He was absolutely determined to do this. That was one thing. That was probably the biggest takeaway from the book that I had, was that Mike Plant was like, he would stop at nothing to do these races. He absolutely loved it, and he was a really, really good sailor. Especially single-handed ocean racer.
How shall we put this? He wasn't constrained by the law in his pursuits of ocean racing, was he?
Yeah, but that was... I mean, Duracell was after his, run-ins with the law and everything. He, I don't know. He was a free spirit, I guess you could say. He was... He had his hands in all kinds of ventures, for sure. But he was a fascinating person. I would have loved to have met him.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that if he were still alive, he might see what we're doing with his second boat. Who knows?
Yeah, Who knows? I guess I would hope so. You know, when I first started thinking about this and learning about Mike Plant, it I don't know, it made me think a lot about what he would think about a project like this, turning his old boat into, and he loved this boat. Like, this was, I think he really, really loved Airco, but I think he really loved this boat.
What do you admire about Mike Plant?
I would say that I admire his dedication to his projects. He was ultra dedicated to the sport of single-handed racing.
Yeah. Okay, so this is really fascinating. We got a snowstorm here in Port Townsend, late winter, and I was just checking on the boat this morning and I noticed this. Tracks in the snow by the boat that look like coyote tracks. There's a little patch of blood, like the coyote injured herself or himself. But look, we can follow these tracks. Up the stairs and into Durcell. We have new patrons to thank this week. Thank you so much to my uncle and aunt in California, David and Lorraine, who also introduced us to one of our favorite books, 2 Years Before the Mast.
And thank you to Ed, who is up in the Northeast. He's building a Sam Devlin boat, which are really cool, locally designed here to the Puget Sound boats. And then also to Mick, who's in Australia, another boat builder. He builds trailer sailors, and they look like awesome little boats. And then also thank you to my friend Judy. She used to work for the 34th America's Cup, carrying around the Ald mug for old Larry Ellison. So thank you very much, Judy.
Finally, I have to correct something I said last week. One of our patrons, Larry, has never windsurfed a day in his life. However, he has surfed all over the planet and sailed solo to Hawaii and plans to do that again this summer. Thank you all. Your support means so much to us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.